When the movie starts, we see the Galactic Republic having trouble because the Trade Federation is blocking trade routes to Naboo. Then, the Supreme Chancellor sends 2 Jedi Knights to solve the problem. Next, they try to board a Trade Federation battleship, but the Trade Federation leader, Nute Gunray, acts suspiciously. As the small space cruiser docks inside the huge Federation battleship, a protocol droid named TC-14 greets 2 darkly robed figures and guides them inside. Some worker droids express concern about the Republic cruiser. Inside the battleship's conference room, TC-14 guides Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn. They discuss their mission to negotiate with the Trade Federation. Qui-Gon advises Obi-Wan to focus on the present. Meanwhile, Nute Gunray and Dalte Define are shocked to learn that the ambassadors are Jedi Knights. Later, in a hallway, TC-14 accidentally interrupts a confrontation between the Jedi and battle droids, narrowly avoiding harm as the Jedi defend themselves with lightsabers. The bridge becomes chaotic with alarms blaring. Nute and Rune watch Obi-Wan on the view screen before he is suddenly cut in half. Nute panics and orders the bridge sealed, but Rune fears it won't be enough. Outside the bridge, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan fight battle droids as Qui-Gon begins cutting through the bridge door. As the sparks fly around the door on the Federation battleship's bridge, Nute orders the blast doors closed, but the Jedi keep cutting through. Despite the doors sealing shut, molten metal starts dropping away as the Jedi persist. Nute panics while Rune urgently asks for destroyer droids. Outside the bridge, 10 destroyer wheel droids transform into battle mode and attack. Qui-Gon senses their presence, and Obi-Wan remarks that negotiation is no longer an option. The Jedi evade the droids' fire and disappear, only to reappear at the end of the hallway. They flee through a closing doorway while the droids continue to attack. On the bridge, Nute and Rune watch the situation unfold on the view screen. Teihao informs them that the Jedi have escaped up the ventilation shaft. In the main bay, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan observe thousands of battle droids being loaded onto landing craft. Qui-Gon realizes it's an invisible army and decides they need to warn Naboo and contact Chancellor Valorum. They agree to split up, each stowing aboard separate ships to meet on the planet. Obi-Wan remarks that Qui-Gon was right about the negotiations being short. The next scene we see, back on the bridge, Teihao receives a transmission from the planet, and Rune identifies it as Queen Amidala herself. Nute is hopeful, but Queen Amidala informs him that the trade boycott has ended and the Senate is voting on the blockade. She sees through Nute's deception, warning him that the Federation is going too far. Nute denies any wrongdoing, claiming Senate approval for their actions. After Amidala's transmission ends, Rune expresses concern about the Senate, but Nute is determined to disrupt communications on Naboo. At that time, in the Naboo Palace throne room, Queen Amidala and her advisors receive a malfunctioning transmission from Senator Palpatine, indicating a communications disruption. They suspect the Federation is jamming their transmissions and fear an invasion. Amidala insists on continuing negotiations, but Governor Bibble and Captain Panaka advocate for preparing to defend themselves. Troop transports begin deploying from the landing craft, and the droid invasion force emerges onto Naboo's surface. As Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan navigate the swamp, they encounter Jar Jar Binks, a banished Gungan. 2 Staps approach, prompting Qui-Gon to throw Jar Jar into the mud for safety. Qui-Gon deflects the Staps' laser bolts, destroying them, while Obi-Wan's weapon malfunctions. Jar Jar offers to guide them to safety in Oto Gunga, despite his fear of returning. As danger approaches, Qui-Gon decides to follow Jar Jar into the swamp for safety. In the Naboo swamp, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Jar Jar want to hide from bad guys, so they go underwater. They wear special masks to breathe. They follow Jar Jar to a cool underwater city called Oto Gunga. There they meet scary guards led by Captain Tarpals. They go to see Boss Nass, the big leader. Then Qui-Gon asks Boss Nass for help, but he says no at first. Qui-Gon uses Jedi magic to change his mind, and they get a fast boat called a Bongo to go to Naboo. Jar Jar gets in trouble, but Qui-Gon helps him and brings him along. They go in a submarine, but they meet big sea monsters on the way. Qui-Gon says they must be brave and keep going. Then we see, on the Federation battleship's bridge, Nute and Rune talk to Darth Sidious, telling him about the invasion. Sidious is happy because the Senate is busy. Nute decides not to mention the missing Jedi yet. In the submarine, things get bad as sparks fly, water comes in, and the power goes out. Obi-Wan fixes it while Qui-Gon calms down scared Jar Jar. They escape a big sea monster and then a bigger one, thanks to Qui-Gon's quick thinking. Just after we see, as the droid army gets closer to Theed, Nute and Rune think they're winning. Underwater, the submarine gets close to the surface, making Jar Jar happy. Near a waterfall, they act fast to stay safe, but a battle droid causes trouble, and their sub falls down the waterfall. They must keep going, leaving the chaos behind. Inside the palace, Queen Amidala and her friends are surrounded by droids. Amidala won't give up, even though Newt threatens them. Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Jar Jar save Amidala's group, impressing her. They all decide to go to Coruscant for help. Some warn about the dangers, but Amidala chooses to go to the Senate. As they head to their spaceship, they fight droid guards but manage to free the pilots. Amidala and her group rush onto the ship, with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan fighting off more droids as they take off, escaping the enemy forces. As the sleek spacecraft exits the hangar, battle droids inside fire at them. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, pilot Reich Oli navigates toward the massive battleship despite the communication jam. In the droid hold, Jar Jar accidentally activates an astromech droid, which helps fix the ship's power drive. Qui-Gon and Captain Panaka decide to head for Tatooine for repairs. In the Federation battleship, Newt and Rune discuss their difficulties and the appearance of a Sith apprentice named Maul. On the Naboo spacecraft, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan thank the little blue droid, R2-D2, for saving them, and Queen Amidala orders Padme to clean up the droid as thanks. In the main area of the Naboo spacecraft, Padme cleans R2-D2, while Jar Jar startles them both by popping out of an open door. They introduce themselves and Jar Jar explains how he ended up with them after a frightening encounter. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Captain Panaka observe as Reich Oli navigates toward Tatooine, aiming to land near the outskirts to avoid attention. The Naboo spacecraft lands in the Tatooine desert, and Obi-Wan begins work on the hyperdrive, while Qui-Gon senses a disturbance in the Force. They set out for Mos Espa, with Qui-Gon cautioning against transmitting messages. Captain Panaka and Padme join them, with Padme eager to explore the planet. As they walk through Mos Espa, Qui-Gon explains the inhabitants and warns Padme to stay close. Jar Jar is anxious, while R2 remains calm. They arrive at a junk dealer plaza to find a replacement hyperdrive part. In Watto's junk shop, Qui-Gon requests parts for a ship, and Watto calls in Anakin Skywalker, who works for him. Qui-Gon and R2 follow Watto to the junkyard, leaving Jar Jar, Padme, and Anakin in the shop. Anakin, intrigued by Padme's beauty, awkwardly compares her to an angel. He shares his life story as a slave and introduces himself as Anakin. Padme sympathizes with him, and they share a moment of understanding as Jar Jar accidentally activates a droid, causing some chaos. Watto won't take Republic money for the hyperdrive, so Qui-Gon, Jar Jar, and R2 leave. Anakin helps Jar Jar by claiming he's connected, stopping a fight. Padme introduces herself to Anakin, who seems sad when she leaves. Watto tells Anakin to clean up before going home. Then we see Anakin shows bravery by defusing a fight with Sebulba. Qui-Gon thanks him, and Padme smiles at him. Anakin shares wise words about fear and courage. Jar Jar admires Anakin's bravery, and Padme agrees. Anakin proudly shows his droid project to Padme, Qui-Gon, and Jar Jar. They take shelter from a sandstorm at Anakin's home. Anakin introduces them to his mom, Shammai, and shows Padme his droid project. Shammai thanks Qui-Gon for food, and they feel warm despite the storm. Anakin shows his protocol droid project to Padme, who's impressed. He talks about building a podracer. C-3PO feels embarrassed without his coverings. During the sandstorm, tensions rise. Amidala gets a distress call from Naboo, while Sidious and Maul plan on Coruscant. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan stay cautious, knowing time is running out. Inside Anakin's hovel during the storm, Qui-Gon, Anakin, Shammai, Jar Jar, and Padme eat and talk about their situation. Anakin wants to help by racing and podracing, despite Shammai's worries. They decide to take the risk to help Qui-Gon. After the storm, Qui-Gon and Padme discuss trusting Anakin. They negotiate with Watto to sponsor Anakin in the race, using their ship as collateral. Obi-Wan worries, but Qui-Gon stays hopeful. Shammai tells Qui-Gon about Anakin's unusual birth. Anakin works on his podracer with his friends and gets it ready for the race. Qui-Gon tends to Anakin's wound and secretly checks his blood, finding a high midichlorian count. He wonders what it means while Shammai watches. At sunrise, Padme wakes Anakin, who dreams about her leading an army. She reminds him to clean up. At the arena, Qui-Gon makes a bet with Watto for Anakin's freedom, using their new pod as collateral. Anakin gets ready for the race, reassured by Qui-Gon. At the desert race arena, the pod racers, including Sebulba and Anakin, get ready. Anakin receives encouragement from his friends, and Padme gives him a kiss for luck. However, when the race starts, Anakin's engine stalls, causing concern among his loved ones. Eventually, he manages to restart it and begins to catch up with the other racers. Showing off his skills, he overtakes competitors and deals with obstacles like Tusken Raiders shooting at the racers. Everyone watches anxiously, hoping Anakin will succeed. As Anakin races, he skillfully passes other racers while Sebulba sabotages competitors, causing chaos. Qui-Gon meditates, Padme and Shammai worry, and Jar Jar annoys Phanta for updates. Meanwhile, Watto laughs confidently, expecting Anakin's defeat. Anakin's pod shakes as he dodges explosions from other racers' pods. Anakin impressively moves up to 6th place, while others face mishaps, adding tension for Shammai and Padme. Despite Sebulba's sabotage, Anakin takes the lead, but Sebulba crashes, allowing Anakin to win. After the victory, Watto accuses Qui-Gon of cheating, but Qui-Gon remains calm and instructs Watto to fulfill their agreement. Finally, Qui-Gon defeats Darth Maul, and the ship escapes into space. Anakin meets Obi-Wan, amazed to encounter another Jedi. In the cockpit, Rick Ollie activates the hyperdrive, and the ship enters hyperspace. On Naboo, Federation droids patrol while Newt threatens Governor Bibble. Inside the ship, Padme notices Anakin shivering and offers him her over-jacket. Anakin gives Padme a wooden pendant, symbolizing their bond. The ship lands on Coruscant, where Chancellor Valorum and Senator Palpatine await. Amidala expresses gratitude, and Palpatine discusses Senate matters. In the Jedi Temple, Qui-Gon informs the Council about the Sith Lord, assigned to protect Amidala. Anakin bids farewell to Padme and prepares to train as a Jedi. Amidala addresses the Senate, calling for a vote of no confidence in Valorum. On the Jedi balcony, Obi-Wan worries about Anakin's training. Qui-Gon insists on Anakin's potential despite Council doubts. In the Council chambers, Anakin faces a test, while Amidala decides to return to Naboo. In the Jedi Council chambers, Anakin's fate is debated. Despite Qui-Gon's insistence that Anakin is the chosen one and should be trained, the Council refuses, citing his age and the presence of too much anger in him. Qui-Gon decides to take Anakin as his ward but is forbidden from training him. The Council instructs Qui-Gon to take Anakin with him to Naboo but not to train him. As they leave Coruscant, Qui-Gon imparts some wisdom to Anakin about midichlorians and the Force. Amidala and her retinue also board the ship, and they all depart for Naboo. As the Naboo spacecraft approaches the planet, Anakin learns more about piloting from Rick Ollie. Meanwhile, Queen Amidala discusses her plan with Qui-Gon and Captain Panaka, expressing her determination to reclaim Naboo. The ship lands in a swamp on Naboo, where Anakin reunites with Padme and expresses his willingness to help. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan discuss the Queen's plan and their role in the unfolding events. Obi-Wan apologizes for his earlier disagreement with Qui-Gon, who acknowledges his growth and potential as a Jedi Knight. In the Naboo swamp, Padme, accompanied by Captain Panaka, the Jedi, and her group, seeks an alliance with Boss Nass and the Gungans against the Trade Federation. Despite initial resistance from Boss Nass, Padme persuades him to consider an alliance by emphasizing their shared struggle against the Trade Federation's invasion. She promises that if they join forces, they can defeat the common enemy and protect their homes. Boss Nass reluctantly agrees to think about the proposal, but insists that Padme and her group must leave Naboo and not involve the Gungans in their fight. Padme accepts the condition, expressing gratitude for the opportunity to present their case and hoping for future peace between their peoples. Meanwhile, Newt Gunray, Rune Hako, and Darth Maul discuss the situation, with Darth Sidious advising patience and caution. Outside, the Gungan and Naboo forces prepare for battle, with Jar Jar reluctantly appointed as a general. Padme outlines the battle plan, involving a diversion by the Gungans to draw away the droid army, while the Naboo sneak into the palace to capture the Viceroy. Despite the risks, everyone is determined to proceed with the plan, knowing that the fate of Naboo hangs in the balance. In the Naboo Palace throne room, Darth Sidious approves of Newt Gunray's plan to wipe out the Gungan and Naboo forces, believing it will work to their advantage. At that time, in the Naboo swamp, the Gungan army mobilizes with soldiers riding Caddis and Fambas, equipped with shield generators. As they march towards the horizon, they encounter Federation tanks on a ridge. The Gungan general orders the activation of their shield, forming a protective barrier over their assembled warriors. Anakin has hidden. Anakin peeks out cautiously, watching them go. As the group heads towards the exit, they encounter little resistance, having cleared most of the battle droids in the hangar. Padme leads the way, determined to confront the Viceroy in the throne room. Then we see, in the Naboo grass plains, the Gungan army engages in a fierce battle against the droid army. Despite being outnumbered, the Gungans hold their ground, utilizing their shield generators and various weapons to fend off the droids. 9 oversees the battle from a vantage point, observing the Gungans' defensive efforts. Back in Theed, Darth Maul informs Newt Gunray and Rune Hako that the Jedi are involved in the attack, causing concern among the Federation leaders. The situation escalates as the battle intensifies both in the palace and on the grass plains, setting the stage for a climactic confrontation between the opposing forces. In the midst of the intense battle, Anakin finds himself in the cockpit of a Naboo starfighter, with R2 by his side. As Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan confront Darth Maul, Anakin takes control of the starfighter and begins firing at the destroyer droids, aiding Padme and her troops who are under attack. Despite his initial confusion and clumsiness, Anakin manages to operate the ship's weapons and shields effectively, dealing significant damage to the enemy droids. That time we see, in space, the Naboo fleet engages in a dogfight with Federation fighters as they approach the space station. Rick Ully coordinates the attack, directing different flight groups to target enemy fighters and make runs on the transmitter. The battle intensifies as both sides exchange fire in the vastness of space. Back on the grass plains of Naboo, Jar Jar's clumsiness inadvertently becomes an asset as he gets entangled with a blasted droid, causing it to malfunction and fire randomly, taking out several other droids in the process. However, the situation becomes more dire as 9 orders the deployment of wheeled droids, which roll through the Gungan deflector shields and transform to engage the Gungan forces in close combat. Despite their valiant efforts, the Gungans face heavy losses as the destroyer droids continue to wreak havoc on their ranks. Anakin flies back toward the battlefield. He spots the Federation battleship and realizes that's where the autopilot was taking them. Determined to make a difference, he takes control of the starfighter and steers it toward the battleship, despite the overwhelming odds. Meanwhile, inside the Theed power generator, the intense duel between the Jedi and Darth Maul continues. They maneuver across the narrow bridge, exchanging blows with incredible speed and skill. Darth Maul leaps onto a higher level of the bridge, with the Jedi following closely behind, their lightsabers clashing in a dazzling display of combat prowess. Outside the palace, Padme, Captain Panaka, and a small group of Naboo soldiers find themselves trapped by battle droids in a hallway. They blast their way out through a window and onto a ledge overlooking a waterfall. Using special attachments from their pistols, they shoot thin cables that embed into a ledge above them, allowing them to climb up the wall and escape. Back on the grass plains of Naboo, the Gungan army faces overwhelming odds against the destroyer droids. Despite General Seal's order to retreat, Jar Jar inadvertently causes chaos among the droids, destroying several with his clumsy actions and prompting the Gungans to renew their attack with renewed determination. In space, Anakin finds himself in the midst of the intense dogfight, maneuvering his starfighter with R2's help. Despite the danger, Anakin manages to regain control of the ship and joins the battle, determined to fulfill his role and make a difference in the fight for Naboo's freedom. Anakin, having managed to evade enemy fighters, finds himself inside the enemy space station's hangar, with R2 by his side. He struggles to regain control of his overheating ship as droids approach. After that, we see, in the Theed power generator pit, the intense lightsaber duel between Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Darth Maul continues. Darth Maul kicks Obi-Wan off one of the ramps, causing him to fall several levels, while Qui-Gon engages the Dark Lord. Qui-Gon manages to knock Darth Maul off another ramp, and he lands hard on a lower level. Qui-Gon follows him, while Obi-Wan rushes to catch up. In the power generator's electric beam hallway, Darth Maul and Qui-Gon enter a long corridor filled with deadly rays that pulse on and off at regular intervals. Darth Maul makes his way down several walls of the deadly rays before they close, with Qui-Gon just one wall away from him. Obi-Wan, lagging behind, waits impatiently for the next opening in the wall of rays, who are engaged in a fierce lightsaber duel. Despite Obi-Wan's efforts, he arrives just in time to witness Darth Maul fatally strike Qui-Gon, leaving him slumped on the floor. Outside, the Gungans find themselves overrun by the droid army, with some fleeing into the hills while others are herded into groups by the relentless battle droids and destroyer droids. Jar Jar and General Seal are held captive among other officers, reflecting on the dire situation. Meanwhile, in the palace throne room, Padme, Captain Panaka, and their officers are brought before Newt, Rune, and the Neimoidian council members by battle droids. Sabe, disguised as the Queen, makes a bold entrance, revealing herself and declaring that they will not be signing any treaty. In the ensuing chaos, Padme takes charge, using the element of surprise to eliminate the remaining battle droids and assert her authority. In the power generator's melting pit, Obi-Wan engages in a desperate duel with Darth Maul, who seems to have the upper hand. However, in a dramatic turn of events, Obi-Wan manages to outsmart Darth Maul, ultimately defeating him and rushing to Qui-Gon's side as he lies dying. Obi-Wan cradles his fallen master, Qui-Gon, quietly weeping as Qui-Gon's last words echo in his mind. Meanwhile, aboard the Naboo starfighter in the Federation hangar, Anakin faces a group of battle droids surrounding the ship. With determination, Anakin activates the ship's systems despite the overheating warnings. As the battle droid captain demands Anakin's identification, the ship's engine ignites, and Anakin swiftly takes control. With the ship's shields up, Anakin deflects the droid's laser blasts, then fires back, causing chaos in the hangar. Launching torpedoes, Anakin inadvertently hits the reactor room, triggering a catastrophic explosion within the Federation battleship. Outside, on the Naboo grass plains, the droid army suddenly freezes in place, leaving the Gungans bewildered. In the main hangar courtyard, the Supreme Chancellor's cruiser lands as Captain Panaka and troops guard Nute Gunray and Rune Hako. Obi-Wan, the Queen, and her handmaidens confront the Neimoidians, demanding accountability. As the Chancellor and Jedi Masters descend from the cruiser, they praise Amidala for her bravery. Inside the turret room of the Naboo Palace, Yoda questions Obi-Wan's decision to train Anakin, but ultimately agrees to let him become Obi-Wan's Padawan. At Qui-Gon's funeral on the steps of the funeral temple, his body is cremated, and Obi-Wan assures Anakin that he will become a Jedi under his tutelage. As Qui-Gon's form fades away, Mace Windu and Yoda share a solemn discussion, realizing they faced a Sith. They wonder if it was the master or the apprentice who fell. In Theed's Central Plaza, jubilation fills the air as a grand parade unfolds. Children sing, flowers flutter, and cheers resound. Amidala, Palpatine, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and the Jedi Council unite, joined by Gungan soldiers, holding up the globe of peace as a symbol of harmony. Through this scene, this fantastic movie ends here. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating videos. Make sure to hit the bell icon to receive notifications whenever we post new content. Your support helps us continue creating videos you'll love. Thank you for being part of our community.